welcome back to another episode of Conversations, the place where we get to practice learning new perspectives and creating new thoughts and trying on new ideas instead of just having the answer today. So, if you're new to the show, this is a place where we all get into the conversation. So, while we have me and the phenomenal Kenny on screen for us today, this is a conversation for all of us. And today we're talking about something that is going to continue to be an important conversation. The more and more AI likes to come into play, which is what we talked about last week. Digital inclusion. So this is really how are we, or how are we not creating inclusion through our access to digital technologies? And are we looking at all of the potential gaps where these things are happening right now, and what can each of us do to create more digital inclusion on an ongoing basis instead of less digital inclusion, even though we have more digital solutions? So that already sounds like a can of worms before we haven't even opened a can. But this is a conversation for all of us. So if you are here and you are listening live, let us know that you're here, and please share your thoughts, your questions, your experiences, your perspectives on digital inclusion. I know there were some amazing digital inclusion peeps who are RSVP for this event. So if you are here and this is kind of like your jam, please make your voice known in the comments today. We really appreciate that. And we have a phenomenal special guest to participate in this digital inclusion conversation, Kenny Wood. So Kenny, before we we might dump a whole bunch of things, but we're going to jump into the conversation. But before we do that, Kenny, can you share with everyone a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and why digital inclusion is so important for you?
Yes, so first, thank you for having me on, Tracy, and it's amazing connecting with you a couple of months ago. But yeah, I'm in London, or just outside. I'm actually in Lincolnshire. I moved to a nice rural area. It's 7 p.m. where I am today. And then I'm Kenny. And where my journey started really was when I was 19. And I was really lucky. I started off at Vodafone. We opened the first ever real mobile phone store, and we started with dumb phones. And I suppose that's where hopefully this conversation can lead us with digital inclusion. I was very lucky to be part of a squad of people, I called it, and a team of people that I'm still sort of very lucky to be friends with. And we were sort of trailblazers at the end of the day. We started with dumb phones, so 19, worked my way up, and then all the way through the journey has led me on a bit of a crazy journey, if I'm honest, and I feel lucky. So where that led me to was sort of from in the telecoms to then falling into Google and Apple, and even at one point crossing the pond and visiting the Googleplex, which was mind-blowing in itself. And I think to underpin it for me, the reason why I love technology is I'm dyslexic, and I felt very lost at school. But what technology has done for me, and the reason why I see digital inclusion really at the end of the day is key, is it gave me a platform to go off for the last 20 plus years, create a job and a career for myself, build my family and stuff like that. But I think it's vitally important. Technology is the key now, and most everything we do, and I don't think anybody can be offline. We need to get everybody online. But I do come at it very differently. So I'm open to anybody who wants to give me sort of questions, and then I'll leave with Tracy and I'll add on to it.
Yeah, this is great because I feel like when we say big things like digital inclusion, we all have our own definition of what that means to some degree. And it's really interesting to think about it from a telecommunications perspective, because I remember those days of the dumb phones.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I always joke with my son about this concept of T9, which he'll never understand. We're like, even if you had to send a text, there was only those 9 numbers and you had to do this. And it's kind of insane. I think about this from my grandparents' perspective quite often, because even in my lifetime, like my dad worked for Motorola at one point. So we had the like Motorola Razr when it was like the cool new thing, first flip phone. And you're thinking like, wow, this is such like crazy technology. And now, I don't know. I mean, my parents were still living in their same house. So it was maybe like 25 years ago compared to what we have today.
Well, no, I was thinking about it actually over the last couple of days. And I've just spoken to obviously Emma Weston and all, and that's another part of the journey. But I think it is vital when I say telecoms, because I think we was at like trailblazers. So what I mean by that, it's a big word, isn't it? But what I mean by that is if you look at like 2G and where we was going, we sort of built the infrastructure or the framework that everything sort of added onto, like Lego blocks. So when we talk about digital inclusion, I think what's key is like when we had the 2G phones, like Nokia, so we had the very dumb phones, as we like to call them, is that when I look back on that time, for me, it was like box shifting. So you didn't really have to do any of the heavy loading. All they done was send a text message. You put the battery in the back of it, and obviously a 3310, if you dropped it on your foot, you probably broke your foot. But basically, 3310 was just literally box shifting. And, when I look back, we used to shift 3,000 a month at one point. It was like you were just literally sending them out the door as quickly as possible. And then obviously we started moving into things like 3G and data, Vodafone Live, all sorts of crazy stuff. But I think one of the key points around that point, when we talk about digital inclusion, how we can get everybody online, is what happened was, as a key point. So when we sort of shifted from 2G to the 3G side of it, I was quite lucky to basically, we thought, well, how can we move from box shifting? And we sort of moved to an educational piece. So we created a thing called like walkout talking. So it was like, well, how can you move from 3310 and bring this to life? So it became around about conversations, educating people. So actually upskilling people, when I look back now, I smile because we was like doing this before it was even thought of. We was educating people coming in. They was moving from just literally walking out, taking a phone home, taking it out of the box. We started taking it out of the box. Then just quickly to bring it up to speed, then crazy things happened because then Steve Jobs walked out on the stage, then he pulls out an iPhone, and then that changed the game completely for many things. A year later, like the App Store. And again, if you look at people in the telecommunications industry, I think one key, what we was really good at, was moving at speed and training, and what I was talking to you about, because I don't know if you was aware of, you might be if you was in the industry, but we had to learn all this stuff from sort of like BlackBerries, Nokias, Palm Pre's. Sometimes we would only have, if we had our team, we had 72 hours to try and get them all up to speed and train 15, 16 people in the store. We'd have embargoes on stuff. And, we would have lines of customers coming in expecting us to be able to educate them, upskill them, and essentially get them included with that digital device. And I think that's the conversations that I've had over the last 12 months with people, which has led me to a bit of a sort of, I've gone back 20 years, because when I talk to everybody about this digital inclusion and where we're going, as you said, it's very sort of, it's not segregated, but, you get signposted to a lot of people. So we've got amazing people doing amazing work, giving out devices, like, had the pleasure of being with Susan Gow for Laptops for Cambridge. Then you look at Emma Weston, who does the training side of it. We have the Good Things Foundation. We've got all these amazing people in the space. But actually, when you look at it, and what the reason why we done so well back in the day is because you had one point of contact. You could walk into that shop and you could get all the help that you walk. So it feels like for me, like when people ask me the answer, how do we solve digital inclusion, which is the big question, is I do feel we need these. It's like a mobile phone shop in reverse. It's like a digital triage. We need to be able to be inclusive of everybody, because obviously, just sort of alluding to it is, but with inclusion, what we sometimes do, we pick on the 13 million people, not pick on them, but 30 million people we know roughly say are excluded. But actually, when you look at digital inclusion, it should include everybody. And we should really try to have a way of having like a one-stop shop, is like essentially what you want to call it. And I think that's what, I think the reason why I want to bring that into it about the telecoms, because it is vitally important. Because it was, when I look back, it was crazy, right? Like literally we could say we was doing an iPhone launch. On the day of the iPhone launch, you'd get in like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. We'd be getting an email from Samsung saying, right, this phone is launching 2 days later. So not only have we gone through the upheaval of training all these staff on iPhones and App Stores and all the other stuff, we're now trying to pull the staff in after they finish, after giving out thousands of iPhones. We're saying, right, shut the store, you've got safe over there, because now we need to train you on this new device or whatever was going to happen. And I just think that's a really good point to sort of hand over to you now, because if you look at that from a key point of view, is where we're going with digital inclusion. We're going to need to keep changing at pace. And we know we've got big targets, as like Good Thing Foundations wants to get 2030, I think their target is. But as you just alluded to, is digital inclusion will never end. This will just keep evolving and keep changing every single day. And really the only way we're going to get ahead of it is we're going to have to move at a speed that's going to be crazy, isn't it? Let's be honest. And that's why when I look back to telecoms, what we was really good at, you could chuck any phone at us, any product launch, anything. I mean, it got crazy at one point with iPhones. You couldn't even switch them on to a certain time and date because it kept connected to the network and all sorts of crazy stuff. But I think that's key, isn't it? Is that we need to move at speed. I think digital inclusion will just grow. I don't think we'll ever crack it, and I don't think we'll ever get to 100%. I hope we do. But from a technology point of view, and you just said, in the way it innovates and it changes, I think we're going to have to just keep doing this constantly. It's just going to have to be evolving, and different people will become like excluded, as you like to call. And it's all like a training and educational piece. And probably end it on that part is like from the industry that I'm from is that, and I want to bring this into the conversation, which we probably can add to a bit later, is like the altnets and telecoms. Is like, we need to move from like a sales-led model to more of an educational piece and bringing people along with us, like the shareholders and the investors, with getting into more conversations around ESG and CSR to show them the benefit of them getting involved with us. And then I think personally that could then generate what they need. Like, we don't like to talk about is sales at the end of the day, but let's be honest, having a great conversation, educating people, that's just the way forward, isn't it? I think that's just my view.
Yeah. Well, and so this is making me think of my grandma. Okay. So, because my brain is going to, when we talk about inclusion, that makes me feel like there are people who are currently not included, right? So we've got this group of people who are not included, which is why we need to talk about digital inclusion. And I feel like if there was a poster child or a poster grandma for digital inclusion, it would be my grandma. She tries really hard. So she has a smartphone, but she doesn't have like any of the features on her smartphone. So she has like bare bones. We have this like family album picture sharing app she has access to, and it's like very specific things. But there's some, and we've talked about this before, Kenny, in our conversations, is a lot of the labs, medical labs, have moved their entire booking process to online, and you can't call the location to do anything. You can't call the location to find out where they are. You can't call the location to find out their hours. You can't call them to book an appointment. There's no phone line. You have to go to the website to do the things. And my grandma won't go to the website to do the things. So from your perspective, because you're talking about this education, is this an educational problem? Is this a resource that really, I feel like all of the seniors facilities should just have like a digital resource to help the residents.
No, it resonates. But what I mean by that is we've only got to look at the analog switch off in 18 months. And I can say that in a rural area, I can tell you exactly like this happened. So I've got we've got a GP surgery now is going your way. So obviously what they're telling people now is that they've put these digital kiosks where you have to manually book in. So we've had people that are refusing to, because they're saying now they've got to do this online booking process. They're now obviously being sort of told to go that way, but there's no actual educational training or like the why or how to do it. But now what they're doing is that, the conversations I'm having with people, they're going, well, I'll just go in and see the second, like the assistant behind the wall. But when they go into the desk now, the actual assistant behind the desk is now saying, I can't book you in anymore. And she directs them to obviously the touch screens. So she's even now telling them as you said, the sort of missing block in this is it's all an educational piece, isn't it, at the end of the day? Is that in 18 months' time in the UK, we're having like the analog switch off, we're going digital, and that's, the way they're pushing pretty much everybody towards nowadays. And yeah, you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, the fundamentals of all this is that we don't need to overthink it, do we? Essentially, what we do is we don't want to be fearful of it. And I've said this before, is it's like if we can take the fear out of it through education, that will bring down the anxiety and exactly go back to what you said, is rather than someone being adverse to it and saying, I'm not going to do it, but if we overcome that fear and educational part of it, that then will open up the barrier. And actually, I've got a really quite a nice story, really. And it's just, we had a guy called Bob in Vodafone. So he was an older gentleman, and he actually bought his first phone off us. And the reason why he came in was just because we sat him down and gave him a bourbon biscuit and a cup of tea. And then he used to come in every week after that, and he used to just have a conversation with us. And the guy was incredible. And all it was literally, we took him in, we could see, I remember it, because I remember his name, Bob, he was amazing. And even when I was out and about, he used to always say hello to us. And he used to come in, bring us stuff for Christmas. But that's it, isn't it? I think sometimes when we overthink it and we sit people down, is that technology can be quite scary and fearful. But actually, when you break that down and you just, as you said, overcome that barrier, that's it, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's a journey that we're on, and we need to bring people with us, not against. And that's the hard part, I suppose, is how can we get people, because we're going to go that way. And some people don't like being told what to do and all. But as you just said, going back to the GP situation, is that I know this, that the GPs now are going, digital. And I think I was in London about a month and a half ago, and this was just like, I'm not hiding anything, but the London Office of Technology, we've got a guy that's building an app that's already built ChatGPT into a virtual GP surgery. So rather than talking to the person, he's got a bot now that he's powered with ChatGPT that will signpostally diagnose you with the new AI. So that's how far that we've got. So if you think about it all, but how many people would be aware of what we've just said? Very small. It's community based. It's got to be education led, and we've got to do that bit at the beginning, I think. And we're all doing. There's amazing people out there all doing it, but it's, as I said, it's again, when you signpost someone for the help, it can get very fragmented. You need like one place to be able to go, or organised, essentially like a digital hub. I've always said that. But yeah.
Okay, I want to go quickly to Samina's question, because she's saying training is required. And so what about mindset? Because there's specifically, this is talking about the medical systems going totally digital. We have a lot of seniors who don't have access to digital resources or digital training. Like my grandpa has a cell phone, but he has arthritis so bad in his hands that he can't use it. And so I feel like this is almost like a new job role, right? And even we're talking about healthcare and telecom, but even if you're looking at it from a business perspective, if you're a grocery store or whoever who is selling to these types of demographics that don't have, now McDonald's has all of their, they have the screen, right? And good, what if my grandma's arms can't reach the top of the screen, right? And she can't order a Big Mac, and there aren't any people around. So where is this balance in we need these people in these roles to be almost like digital inclusion coaches?
No, potentially, but there's a quick one. Two things I can probably answer this question with, which would be key for me. One point you've just alluded to, and if you ever want to look at how to do digital transformation successful and how to embrace technology, look at McDonald's. As you just said, look at how their digital strategy. I can't remember the exact name, but go and look at it. I advise everybody. It's incredible the way they sort of done it long term, sort of fed it in. They didn't just do it all at one go. And then the second part is, talking about the healthcare stuff is quite not easy for me, but I experienced it. So we had, this was a couple of years, it's a good 5 years ago now. So we had elderly in the care that were, the call outs were not all, they had 30% that was falling over. So I was like, why are these elderly people falling over, first of all? And he was like, well, it was mainly at night time. So then I went round there and I was like, why are you falling over? And then it dawned on me, the reason why they was falling over, it was quite simple, was for them to go and put the light switch on was a real big task because of mobility issues. So when they're fumbling around in the dark, so I was like, well, if we could, because obviously quite a lot of them were against it, but I said, could we look at, I don't know, let's see how it goes. So what we did, we said, well, if we put a connected light bulb in and an Alexa, and they could do that via voice instead of having to get off the chair, surely that would work. It was really simple. So we thought, well, let's try it. But the way we overcome the obstacle with, I remember it now with the elderly people, is to sort of overcome the barrier was music. So what was that is that when we put it in there, initially it was put the lights on and off. But actually, when they could realise that they could put any music on, they used to transport themselves back to this, and some of them were on their own, and it became sort of like I don't like the word companion because that's a bit strong for technology, but it was really emotional to see, because not only did it stop the call outs, because obviously the lights were going on, but actually I was making a connection with that device because the music was bringing back a memory from a really nice point of their life, and they really loved hearing the music because music is quite emotive, isn't it? Let's be honest. So actually, we ended up not talking about the device or actually what we was going to do. It more became about how they would use it and what they felt. So the lynch point for it really was music. We just led with it. And I believe, I don't know, I was sort of only there for a couple, but that went quite well. But that's just how simple something is, isn't it? 30% of the call outs was at night time because they was falling over to put the light switch on. Yeah. So when we overcame that, but that's how simple technology can be when you sort of frame it. I think that hopefully answers the question, but I get it. I think I said this to you before. I don't know if everybody knows what Marmite is, but I call it's like Marmite, isn't it? 50% either love it or they hate it. What we do in technology is like Marmite, isn't it, at the end of the day? and that's it. At the end of the day, it's never gonna. Well, everybody. It would be lovely if everybody said, "Oh, we love it," and they'll all go with it. But there's always going to be that element of, as we've talked about, the fear or these anxieties, what goes within it.
Yeah.
But you're right about a new job role.
Yeah. Well, and this is interesting too, because Samina is sharing too that her mom is totally capable, but refuses to embrace the non-human aspect. And I think this is like, so like my son, he's 5. He's a Generation Alpha. He has grown up with technology. Like, he doesn't understand how to watch regular TV. He just watches YouTube and skips ads, and that's his reality, right? I used to have to get up and turn the channel on my old console TV, right? Yeah, literally, we had one of those. There's this, how important is the conversation around digital inclusion? How important is this aspect of like the human's relationship with the technology? Because I feel like if we're just going to be like, nope, technology is bad, then you won't accept education from a digital inclusion perspective. So how important is that mindset piece?
Yeah, no, so I sort of framed the question for, and I think this might help. So actually, is that what if we could free up time? So take the older cohorts. So like we had up here. So in rural areas, they have sort of transport issues. So we have like community car shares and stuff like that. It can take us 45 minutes just to get to the shopping centre. So if you take that time that we're going to put them in a car and driving, let's just say if we was to free up that 45 minutes, this is like exactly what I'm trying to say, is that think about if we went round there, we could help them do their online shopping, but take back that 45 minutes of time and then actually do some gardening with them, or rather than sitting in the car for 45 minutes, look at a way of trying to free up the time. So then you're right, we can then spend that emotional connection and use technology as a positive to free up the time. So it could be something as simple as, rather than sitting in the car for 45 minutes, driving them to Tesco's, maybe walking around for another 30 minutes, and then let's say, I don't know, a total hour and a half, I don't know, just hypothetically. But you think, you could, instead of taking an hour and a half of volunteering that I've done in the past, or you can do, you could go around there and then spend actually an hour and a half, wait till, say, one of the delivery guys turns up from one of the big supermarkets, whoever they are, but you could be there helping put the shopping in, but then you've actually freed up an hour of your time to just sit and either have a chat, do a bit of gardening for it, whatever that, go for a walk with them if you wanted. But actually that could free up the time to exactly what we're saying there, is that then that gives you more time, doesn't it? And it is vital to have that human connection. I mean, I think that's quite a good sort of way to sort of frame it and look at it. I think if you can free up the time to then do the human connection, surely that's a positive. I mean, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, and there's more, I think people have looked at more of these options since COVID, because we had to, right? So we can't go to the grocery store. So we've looked at new ways to get groceries, and then realized that potentially there is a time saving there that I don't have to spend. And so I think it's becoming a bigger part of the conversation, but there's people who are still like, they have their habits, right? And then this is how I do it. And like you said, there's never going to be 100% digital inclusion, because there won't ever be 100% of people that are like, yes, please give me all this information so that I can do all the things. If they don't think they need to do things, or they feel like they've got a workaround, or I always say to my grandma, because she's mostly deaf, right? The phone is a terrible way to communicate for you anyway, right? Like text or voice to text is like much better than like any other thing. And you have this, right? But it comes built into most phones nowadays. But there's that like habit building process too, right? So this isn't just like I'm going to come in and I'm going to train you, like you said with Bob, right? Like Bob came back week over week, and there's this like continual support mechanism that is really involved to help people build like new digital habits so that digital inclusion is possible.
And I think that's key. And it's, what I say to people is look out for the positive news stories, because as you said, there's a lot of negativity sometimes, and sort of, there's a couple that are just springing into my mind. I tell people, go and Google, go and look up The Big Issue. So The Big Issue worked with Eyes Little, and they've done a lot of work to get homeless people a bank account, and they got them like a contactless card machine. And, when you look at the study from that, and it's the way that allowed them to get a bank account, they allowed them to save money for a deposit for a room. It got them off the street. It got them into the thing. So that's the good part of it, isn't it? When you look at like that one of it, and then there's another one, a homeless charity, I believe, on the south side near California. But what they did is they went round to homeless people, captured messages, and then they asked these people. They found like lost people, so they went and found the people that they'd run away from, and whatever happened. But they've done it in a really nice way. They asked the person, obviously, first of all, do you want to find this person? So they would capture the message for them. Then they went off, and they would have a cup of tea or coffee, but show them the video, and then they would connect them via a Zoom or Teams, and they would reconnect these homeless people. And that, to me, is that I think that's what we need to do. We need to talk more of the positive sides of what this can do, and then, you know, move forward with it, because they're two massive positive things for me. That just look at the positive sides of it. It is positive. I get it. It's, as we said, fearful, but it can be done. But I think, as you said, in all, and I've always said this, you know, if you look at like a digital care community champion, whatever that person is, and actually they said it this week in the government that, you know, from a local council level, that we need to have like a digital champion, someone full time within these roles up and down the country. They need to be there, because that's the only way, isn't it, really, we're going to move forward, because you need someone there with the understanding and sort of the empathy and stuff like that. And as what we're discussing, it's a lot to take on, and there's a lot of moving parts that you need to control. And then mixing, as we said, the community, because the community is a whole different kettle of fish. You're going to have different people, different opinions. You know, we haven't even gone down that road yet of, you know, when you do talk to these people, their views are very sort of social media. So the digital literacy side comes into it. So you've got a lot of moving parts. But as you said, it is a new job role. Or as I've always said, is I personally feel we need like these digital sort of hubs or sign where you can literally go and physically just walk in, essentially, like a triage, like a digital triage, as I like to call it. Like when you go into A&E and they sort of assess you.
Well, and this is why I love this kind of like, when we think about where a like emergency triage and the Apple Store combine, right? That I love a good intersection, and these are the types of things, right? Like that's where the opportunities for digital inclusion exist.
So yeah, but like you've just hit another key point. If you strip away like Apple, so like Apple was, and again, go and look it up. I tell everybody. So what Apple were, and they don't, you know, Apple were amazing. So if you strip away the big shiny store, I say this to everybody, all right? Apple is just incredible. You know, for me, you know, one of my favorites is Steve Jobs. I do think he's, but when you look at an Apple store, one of the key moments for me, I think, was Today at Apple. So when they launched, go and look at it. So if you look at the ethos of the reason why they launched Today at Apple, it was all an educational piece. It wasn't about going in there going, oh, that's like really expensive. Or it was about, and it was driven by education. And they became like a town square, and it was anything from music to finding out. And it didn't matter if you was in the Apple ecosystem or, you know, there was that sales element undertone, but the main key focus was about education, exactly what you're talking, you know. But I don't think we should be scared of it, because when I say about Today at Apple, oh, that's hugely expensive. I'm like, no, but when you boil down like just the essence of what Today at Apple is, I believe anybody can do it. Because at the end of the day, Today at Apple is just driven by the people. If you go to a Today at Apple session, you know, I do genuinely think they're incredible staff. And you know, they take people on a journey for an hour. I mean, just to give you an idea, I mean, they do a digital photography walk. Now, digital photography walk, they take people out of the store. That sounds crazy, doesn't it, in retail? You want to sell them stuff. But they actually take them out. They take them for a walk around the local area, tell them how to frame the, and the reason why they do that is because you're not teaching about the technology. What you're doing is you're making you feel comfortable using that bit of technology. But that's an incredible thing, isn't it? Is you're not selling them something, you're taking them on a walk, you're telling them how to actually take photos, frame it, edit it. Yes, there is that undertone, but isn't that an incredible way to approach like what we talked about within retail, or if you're selling something, if you can, and that's what Today at Apple is, and it's an incredible formula. And I say to people, like, go and look at it, because Today at Apple is just, it's what you just said. They already do it, but strip away the big shiny, I get it, it's cost a fortune. But if you boil down the essence of what they do, anybody can do it, really, I believe.
Well, and I think too, if you like, even from a business perspective, right? If there is like tech platforms that you need to use, or tech platforms that your clients are expected to use, but maybe they come from different countries, or maybe they have different access to the language, right? And just, I think the important piece here is to start to think about these things, right? We have technology, and there's some people, like, I always love watching you on LinkedIn, Kenny, because you're just like always testing out the new thing, and I can learn a lot from you, and I don't have to test it myself, which is convenient. So like, make friends with those types of people, because that's great. But there are people who are excited to be like the first movers, and there are people who are wary to be the first movers. So it's helpful to take that into consideration at all stages of the journey, right? We have these people we want to include digitally. Some of them are going to be super excited about getting all over Chat GPT. And did everybody see my post from yesterday? Because I was really proud of it. I actually used Chat GPT in what I think was the right way for the first time. And I used it in my post, and I credited Chat GPT because I only think that that's fair. But there's some people who want to do that, and then there's some people who don't. So like, do you have programs, education, timelines that take into account the fact that not everybody is going to pick this up at the same rate, that some people are going to need more help, some people are going to need less help, and just make it available, but be creative about the way you're making it available. It's not about everybody opening an app store, right? That looks exactly, feels exactly like Apple's. It's about looking at how can you do that for your people with what you're doing that can help them go along the digital journey.
But yeah, and it's right. It's identifying the right tool. So at the end of the day, look at it like a tool. And obviously, I'll spread that on there again. And if go back to again, Steve Jobs, what he used to say is that technology is like a bicycle for the mind. So when you frame it as a tool, it is at the end of the day. If you don't have the right tool, and it's finding the right tools for that person to do, like the solution, if you want to call it like that. But that's what it is at the end of the day. It is just like you said, it's a tool. You've used ChatGPT to help you do a post. You've credited it worked. And why sort of be scared of it? But I think that's to just throw that in the mix, and all bringing this sort of up with the AI is that digital inclusion now is that that's the question for everybody, isn't it? Is that included in digital inclusion? Do we have to make sure we educate and update everybody on how to use that ethically, and all the other stuff and the framework goes around it, and educate people how to use that new solution? Because ChatGPT just opens up a whole nother can of worms, as you've probably seen on your other show, but we have to include it, because if we don't, then essentially you're not really digitally excluded, aren't you? Because if you can't use that, so we don't know what it is, that's going to cause other problems. But I think that's another topic for another day, when we get into things like digital literacy and the ethics around AI and everything. That could go on for weeks.
Oh, yes.
But it's a topic that we do need to have, and it's not going anywhere. And it's the fundamentals of that. When you look at digital inclusion, it's actually quite important to say, this goes right down to where we do need to start, really schools. Our kids, essentially are going to be coming out, like my eldest is 12, 13, and my other one is 8. They're going to be coming out, calling it the eye of the storm. I firmly believe they're going to come out and have to be upskilled. They're going to leave school and have to go virtually back in, because potentially some of these jobs and what's going to happen with the disruption, I think it will change. And that's quite scary, isn't it? Because the poor kids that come out needing, the jobs that they've been we've set them up for, essentially, there's a high probability some of these job roles won't be about anymore. And that's quite sort of a big thing to look at, because when we talk about these things, sometimes people think it's decades away. But my boy's 13, he's got 4 years before he comes out of secondary school, and then my youngest has got about 7 years. So, within a time frame of probably 10 years, if I look at my children, I think it's going to change massively. I think, and that's the scary part, even for me, because I think we've got 5 to 10 years, and then, it's just going to be a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. Well, and this is like Madeline has a really cool point here too. Technology seems to change so rapidly, it can be hard to keep up even for tech savvy people. And so what is it like? And Samina's talking about like people not wanting to change, right? Like it at a default place, people don't really want to change, right? We've reached this like level of comfort, which is kind of a level of acceptable discomfort, I think, in most scenarios, where we're going to be like, okay, I just don't know this, right? Like I have actively chosen to avoid TikTok for example. Okay? I'm like, I got enough platforms in my life. TikTok I have nothing bad to say about it. It's over there doing its thing, but I'm over here doing my thing, and they're not related. And so where does this, I'm trying to just figure out where in the digital inclusion conversation, this concept of like choice and empowerment, and that like, no, you don't have to go and be on TikTok if you don't want to go and be on TikTok. And there's benefits to being able to book an online appointment, right? Like, in terms of that educational piece, like how this is making me think of tax law and why tax lawyers get paid so much money, because tax law changes every year and they're the ones who have to know it. Like, if you're creating these educational curriculum for digital inclusion, how fast do we have to change that? Like, what's kind of a minimum viable education, like learning how to read, write, and do basic arithmetic, versus like the high level digital inclusion that my grandma would never participate in?
No, I think, look, answer that question for me, it's sort of, I personally think you hit the nail on the head, right? At the end of the day, the only way really we can sort of, I suppose, bring everybody on it, because trying to keep up with it is near on impossible now. It's accelerating at a rate that's just crazy, right? But what we're going to need is a cross collaboration across everybody. So this is going to be like the big step. Like, everybody's going to have to work together. So my view on that is that we can't do it siloed. The only way this is going to work is if we have a cross collaboration, and that even means getting involved with the big people, as I call them, like Google, Apple, grassroots. It's going to have a collective effort on everybody. Because I'll be honest, even I struggle. It's like, you know, when we look at technology and you look at there's always something new coming out every time. It does not stop, right? It's relentless, isn't it? It's like, I suppose, it's just like a tide going in and out every day, happens every day, and it's going to keep on happening. But, you know, it's how can we sort of, we're never going to do it siloed, I don't think. And I think the only way we can do it is cross collaboration, and that means getting everybody involved. And I think just to sort of chuck a bit inward when I say that, is it's not got anything to answer all, but if you look at sort of like we're like in the UK at the moment, we've got a big thing, we're building fibre networks, so we're going around. But we've got a really low take up in the areas where these fibre networks, because again, it's an educational issue, right? So we're building all this stuff, and in the communities where we're putting all this technology and going, right, you can have gigabyte internet and you might have flying, whatever it is, but we're putting all this internet in, but people are not taking up, they're sticking with their old, say, 20 or 30 meg, because they just can't quantify in the head. Why do I need a gigabyte? They don't understand. So it's exactly to that question, right? It's when you take that model, just to give you an idea, was within the altnet. So for them to make their networks viable, they need a 30 to 40% uptake. So when they build in a community for the shareholders, they've got all the money that goes into that. But just to give you a sort of really top level, some of these places have only got a 3% take up in the build area. So you've got like 30 to 40%. And again, that comes back because when they engage with the community, or they go around and even the government have found there's a really low take up because it's very heavily sales led, but the person just doesn't quantify in the head. Well, what's that going to give to me? Well, yeah, that's great. It's going to be, I don't know, 150 times faster, but they just look confused. They're just like, well, I don't understand what that's going to give to me.
It already feels like it's instantaneous for me. So why do I feel like it needs to be faster than that? I remember having this conversation with my telecom, or one of the telecom salespeople, and I was just, they're like, oh, we can like give you double the amount of data for another additional $2 a month. Right? And I'm like, yeah, but you know the percentage of data I actually use on my data plan? I use like 13% of my data. I don't need double that because I don't use what I have. So I just wanted to demonstrate that, because that from a consumer perspective, that's the thought you have. Like, why do I need that? You're not making a good argument. But
that's it. It's like key. So like when you look at sort of, you know, that's a sector, you know, that sector at the moment is that when we say about cross collaboration and getting involved, you know, they're sort of boots on the ground at the moment. They're doing a lot of work within the community. You know, when I go back to that, you know, if you flip that model, like we've just talked about, and they do more of an educational piece than rather than sort of the sales led process, they could do a lot of the work for us. So it's usually just ringing up going, oh, I'm going to give you 100 times faster speed or whatever that would be. If the consumer doesn't understand it, because as you said, I'm in a rural area, I only get sort of 40 meg roughly on an average now. But as you said, it sort of works. So quantifying that as a question is near on impossible, because if someone goes, well, what, I can load a web page half a second faster, you've lost that person, haven't you? It's like, well, exactly.
Yeah.
But this is where it's changing so fast. That is I suppose that's $1 million question, isn't it? Is, how can we keep up? Like, technology now is, I think, overtaking us, like the rate it's going at, and probably chuck that in the mix. That's the reason why, if you look at like a lot of the big companies, there's a lot of big tech people now that are advocating to stop AI and just put the brakes on and take our foot off the gas. So when you look at them, they're even coming out saying, look, we can't keep up. We've got some of these big tech companies going, we need to pause AI because we can't keep up. So it's like, well, if they're sort of sounding the alarm bell, I suppose in one way is, do we need to sort of maybe drop out of fourth gear into third and sort of slow down a little bit and let's catch up? Because at the moment it's going 150 miles an hour, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and that's that is one of the challenges I see with this educational component, is that if we create, I'm just going to call it a curriculum for lack of a better word, but if we create a curriculum today based on what we need to know to create digital inclusion, 6 months from now, it's going to be irrelevant, because over all of that time that we spent training people, and not that we could train as many people as need to be trained in 6 months anyway, but there's this like constant need to keep up. And I think there are industries like you were talking about, like you had to, right? Here's the new phone. You got 72 hours to figure out how to use it because you got to train everybody on it. I think it's possible, but then I think that has to be part of the conversation is, okay, also, where are these people who feel comfortable moving very quickly versus people who don't feel comfortable moving very quickly? And do we have our educational resources assigned to the right people so that we don't also have a whole bunch of stressed out people trying to keep up with digital inclusion because it's not aligned with them?
No, I think people have tried it, and I think the biggest one that has tried it, I think they're still in the States now. They've pulled back from the UK now. But if you look at, I don't know if you heard it. Do you remember Enjoy.com? If anybody's heard about it, so Enjoy.com tried to do the whole, and it was Ron, built the Apple Store with Steve Jobs, but he tried the whole bring the Apple Store to your house. So like literally, they would come to your house, bring what we're talking about. They tried to sort of bring the technology store to your house, but yeah, it didn't pan out. And I think they're still in the States now. I'm not too sure, but I know like it's folded in the UK, and it was a shame because the fundamentals and the concept of it was amazing. But yeah, it just didn't work out because probably, as you said, technology can be quite expensive. It changes at the rate of knots. Training up all these staff all the time sometimes can be problematic in itself. But as I said, going back for me, is like when I look, we managed to do it when we was 2G, 3G. It can be done. But as I said, it needs to be a cross collaboration. It needs to be not siloed. We all need to work together to make it happen. But as you said, having a training framework, if we built a training framework, we could spend 12 months building it. I laugh because you're right. By the time we finish it, it's all out of date.
Right.
We'd be starting again, wouldn't we? This is the problem, isn't it?
Right. It needs to be like built to be flexible and continually grow even while it's being built, which is something that's interesting when I think about this too, right? Because so when I think of technology, I get my phone, it's got the whole book on everything my phone can do. Or this is the last time I got a new car, right? Like literally, it's like a Bible, a Mercedes Bible. You're like, I'm not gonna read this. Like, you gotta know I'm not gonna read this. And so I think there's also this component of we've been provided with the information, so now it's our responsibility as the consumer to learn it and do it. But I think there is that missing kind of team component, like you said, cross collaboration, where people are feeling like, okay, well, yeah, I think I'm a pretty smart person, and I have no idea how to make this thing on my car work, right? And can I just find that little bit of confidence, or maybe it's just like less shame of asking someone a question like, hey, does anybody know what this star button does on my car?
No, well, but that's a key point, isn't it? So, I mean, what you just said on there is like, even the cars are. I mean, if you look at Tesla, they have a direct to consumer model. So, like, they're potentially they don't have showrooms or anything like that we're talking about. It's just like you basically buy the phone on the app, essentially an iPhone on wheels turns up in your house that does 150 million things, and you're probably sat in the car for the next 6 hours with the neighbours looking at you because you're touching every single button on there because no one's explained to you how this thing works. And that's where for me that's an amazing story. I love Tesla, but again, for me, I feel that's a part that's missing, because when I talk to people that do have that Tesla, they do miss, when they shift to a Tesla, they miss that service part when they go and buy a new car, like sitting down and have the experience, as I like to call it. They do genuinely miss it, and they do. I think my friend said, Nick, he said, I sat there for like 5 hours. He said, I didn't know they turned up, and they literally just drove off. And he said, I'm sitting there with this car, obviously Tesla, and he said, I'm just sitting there touching every. I said, I don't know what it was doing, but he said, I was just touching every single button, trying to figure out how it worked. And he said, I was trying to get the app, and he said he was there for hours. Yeah. But that's problematic, isn't it? Because it's a great product and it does really well. I'm not taking anything away from it, but you're missing that element again. Going back to your question, that human element, it's just the connection and the experience of going in there in a big purchase like that. That person taking the time to drive you around, say this does that. Before you drive off the forecourt, they'd sit with you for 30 minutes, you feel comfortable. All that's gone out the window, and now it's just essentially, it's crazy, isn't it? You can essentially buy a £50,000 car, and it just turns up at your house.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is I find myself coming back to this concept in any kind of the digital or technology conversations that I have, is that there's a relationship that exists between a human and the technology. And a lot of technology has been developed to remove the human touch, because the human touch is expensive. It usually costs a person as an employee to create that human experience, right? So if I can just order my skip the dishes online and it shows up at my house, and I don't even need driver. I live in a small town, and so it's a little bit different. We don't have skip the dishes or anything. And so when we order Chinese food, it gets delivered by the local taxi driver. and then she's always like, oh, every time I deliver this for you guys, it makes me so hungry. And I'm like, this is actually one of my favorite parts as a human of ordering food. So yes, the tech platform supports me ordering the food, but part of the meaning and the reason why I keep doing it is because of the human interaction. So I think this is still where there's a lot of room to play. As technology keeps being, I see this specifically in sales and marketing, right? Sales and marketing technology is meant to take people farther away from people.
No, but I think, I call it the blockbuster, because I was talking to my boy really quick, and I think it's I'll bring it in quickly before, but it's like, I explained to him, so you think about Netflix, as a family, it's highly frustrating. So Disney, all these streaming services, right? It used to be an experience. When we used to have a family night, I look back with my dad, it used to be every month. You'd go there on a Friday on payday, and it was an experience. You'd rush home from school, you'd go there with your dad, you'd go in the store, you'd be stressing out looking out the window because they'd have the little card, and that that's the movie that you need. If that card's not, you're not getting it. But it was an experience, wasn't it? You had this, and you was talking to your dad, and you was all getting excited with your sister. You go to the store. It was a whole experience. But now we've replaced that with, we sit there with thousands of options trying to pick a movie. And before we've even picked the movie, we look at it, it's 9 o'clock and the kids go to bed and you've not watched anything, because you're just literally just bombarded with, and it's like, when I look back at that, you're saying the human element, and it was, and it was great, wasn't it? Because when you went to a Blockbuster or a video store, it was like, you could ask the person, we're looking for this sort of title, what would you recommend? And then, we sort of, like you said, we sort of took that part away. And I think that does lead me to what I'm saying, is it's, maybe with digital inclusion, as you've just said, the human element is really expensive, and that's the problem, isn't it? But to where we need to go, do we have to realise that we're going to have that investment, and we're going to have to invest in the human element? We can go out and buy all the laptops for everybody and all the data and get everybody else online, but the key part of it all, really, we need the human element, which is probably going to be the most expensive. I think, you've just hit the nail on the head for me, and I think that's the key in it. This is going to be an expensive journey.
Well, and I mean, it doesn't have to be billions of dollars, but it needs to be investing in the points of human connection that matter, right? So I always say my favorite automation is when an airline will text me that my gate has changed. Right? Like, I don't need somebody to call me to tell me that, right? I need it as fast as possible, and I need it as readily as possible. This is actually something that makes my life easier. There's a lot of technology solutions that don't actually make people's lives easier, even though they're sold that way. And so the last thing I want to chat quickly about today, because we have about 10 minutes left, is like, what is our role in digital inclusion? Because I feel like, yeah, it's great. Like, let's imagine that we have this hub, and there's one place where anybody can go to get the kind of digital training and education that they need to do whatever it is that they're doing. And we're all doing different things, right? So what a farmer might want to be trained in is different than how an online business person might want to be trained. What is our role that we need to own to say, like we've talked about, like, if grandma who's 85 years old wants to opt out, like, I can't force her to go get digital training. So how much do we have to take that ownership on ourselves? Because I'm a big believer in that. Like, I don't believe that if you build it, they will come. Okay, just because someone builds a basketball court doesn't mean anybody's going to go play basketball there.
I think just quickly, I think the key word for me is like guard. Like, we're like the guardians of this, what we're working in now. So for me, it's very much, I'm driven by the younger generation. So obviously we have to pass the baton over to them. So, I think we've got the hardest task, haven't we, right? So, because we've got to build this foundation, because the future is kids. That's 100%. We know that, yeah? But we've got to pass over what we're working in now, what we're talking about. We've got to be able to pass that baton over. It's like a bit like when you're doing a 400-meter relay, pass the baton over and that person can go on and win. And I think that's it. We need to become the sort of the guardians, whatever way you want to call that word, but we need to become the forebearers for it. So we need to become the people that hand over the torch. And actually what we do, we make sure we don't have a lost generation. So yes, we have got like the older cohorts and we've got a younger generation. It has to be encompassing of everybody. But when you look at it, really, essentially what we're doing is that we're passing that on, aren't we? We're trying to sort of build that bridge. So we're helping that person essentially cross the road or cross a chasm. We're building a bridge and we're becoming that navigator. So it's a really hard question to end on, but I think the key for me would be we're the guardians of it. I think the people who go back cross collaboration, it's easy for us. We've grown up in it. We can pick it up. We can use it. And sometimes we forget that. We sort of, we just sort of forget that it's second nature to us, isn't it? It's just easy. At the end of the day, well, it's not easy because we do forget, but I think that's key for me. I think we need to sort of come together and we need to have a sort of solution where we bring all these amazing people together. And yeah, we just help people bridge the gap, bridge the digital divide. There we go. But that's it, isn't it? We're building a bridge and we're trying to help people get across it. And I know that's sort of, but for me, it's that important, really, because this is the world we're going in. And at the end of the day, is that we know we're going to be digitally driven economy. It's going to be 100% digital, and again, it's like Marmite, but the conclusion is we have to help people get there. And I think if we can help each other out, share our knowledge, and the big ticket item for me would be, I would love them. I'd love to be able to have digital hubs up and down the country, digital triages, and just be able to walk in and, whether you're offline, online, grab a coffee, even if you're, be able to walk in and even get a laptop and walk out with the knowledge. I think that would be that's a lofty goal. That probably, would be amazing if that did happen. But, let's keep it simple at the moment and sort of, I think, if you're in your community, if you live locally, if you're in the industry that we're in, like me, I've got my little hole. If you can give yourself an hour and you can put something on in the hole and you could help either the kids or wherever in your community, just go and help at the end of the day. That's it, isn't it?
Yeah. I love this because this is a perfect ending for the conversation, because I was going to say, what's one thing that we could all do to not drop the baton? So if we're equally responsible for passing it, then the people who are going to pick it up from us. And I think this is a great thing for us for every single one of us. We all have a different training in digital. We all have different relationships with digital. And just to think about from your perspective, what is one thing that you could do? What is one thing that you could even maybe just start looking out for, right? Like, Oh, I've been just assuming that like everybody can do this, but would it be easy enough for someone to do that in a wheelchair, or if they're blind, or if they're if, coming from a farm that doesn't have good Wi-Fi, right? Like,
Yeah.
just
Well, no, yeah, we can have one thing. You never know. We could evolve it. We could even have we could even just make it a date. We could pick a date and say, right, let's push it out on social media. Let's all just post something. Let's all go out in our community and do that one thing that helps everybody understand this digital world, and share the kindness at the end of the day.
oh
Could
my
be as
gosh.
simple as that.
Okay, so watch out for this day. Kenny and I
Yeah,
are going to be
exactly.
scheduling, because you know how they do like community cleanup days, and like everybody
Yeah,
goes out
exactly.
and they pick up trash, right? Like,
100%.
literally, you could do this with digital inclusion, and you could have like a digital cleanup day, and it's like a hub where everybody comes and they're just like, hey, I've got this. This is a mess. Oh, you need to go and talk to Steve over there. He is doing how to sort your files club.
Yeah, exactly. Why not? At the end of the day,
That sounds fun.
yeah, give our time for free. Doesn't really, and then, and that's a big impact. And at the end of the day, it's a cool thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So everybody here, stay tuned for a digital cleanup day coming soon from Tracy and Kenny. But also think about, what could you do? What could you do in your community, or even in your family, in your neighborhood, to just like help a friend along on the digital journey? Yeah, and share it, because that I always think about this. I saw this post on LinkedIn, and it was because this person had seen somebody, like, you know how in the, like, you go to the grocery store and there's always the random cart in a parking spot, right? And it could hit a car, but it's just sitting there because someone was too lazy to take it back to the little hub. And so this person was like, oh, I was watching this person and they just like took the cart and put it back. And then so I saw one and I took a cart and put it back. And then they posted it on social media, and I'm sure a whole bunch of people took their carts back. Right? And this is the point, is that we're not sharing it from a like, look how great am I perspective, but when we can start to show people that there are people doing things to create more digital inclusion, it gives people the space to explore what's something I could do to support that. And in so doing, we get more digital inclusion for all of us, which I love.
Correct.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you so much for all of our lovely chat. We had Madeline and Samina and Simon and Joshua in the chat. Thank you guys for joining us today. And for any of you who weren't in the chat, who also joined us today, thank you. I just don't know who you are. That's why you should get in the chat, because then you get a call out. But this, just like all other conversations, might have felt like a can of worms. And that's kind of the point of these conversations, because there isn't one answer to digital inclusion. This is a conversation where we get to explore and discover and experiment and fail and succeed. And that happens by coming back and participating in the conversation. So all of you wonderful folks in the chat, Kenny, myself.
Thank you so much. Amazing.
Yeah, and we are in this conversation of digital inclusion. So get connected with each other, get connected with us. This is the type of people we are. We are the peeps that can help you move your conversation on digital inclusion forward. So on that note, Kenny, where is the best place for people to find you if they would like to stay connected?
Just find me on LinkedIn. Just go on there and just reach out to me if there's anything I can help with. As I said, let's just share the digital kindness at the end of the day, and let's try and get everybody moving. So yeah, just reach out to me. I'm on TikTok and all, actually, so I try everything out. I always try. I throw my hat in the ring with anything. But yeah, if I can help out with anything, I'm a STEM ambassador, and also just reach out to me. Just pick my brains, and it's all good. It's Friday now, so but yeah, reach out.
Yes, and Kenny is tagged in this post, so you can just click on his name, tell him you came from this conversation, because he'll know kind of the things that you learned and why you want to connect. And definitely do that. I have enjoyed every conversation we have had, Kenny. Always new ideas, which is my favorite. So thank you so much for coming and sharing all of your fantastic expertise with us today. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you.
Take care. Bye.